Our third reading is by the poet Stanley Kunitz. Kunitz died in 2006 at the age of 100. He had written poetry right up through his 99th year. He was twice Poet Laureate of the United States in 1974 and 2000, and wrote this particular poem when he was in his late 70s. The Layers. I have walked through many lives, some of them my own, and I am not who I was, though some principle of being abides from which I struggle not to stray. When I look behind, as I'm compelled to look before I can gather strength to proceed on my journey, I see the milestones dwindling toward the horizon and the slow fires trailing from the abandoned campsites over which scavenger angels wheel on heavy wings. Oh, I have made myself a tribe of my true affections, and my tribe is scattered. How shall the heart be reconciled to its feast of losses? In a rising wind, the manic dust of my friends, those who fell along the way, bitterly stings my face. Yet I turn, exulting somewhat, with my will intact to go on, wherever I need to go, and every stone on the road precious to me. In my darkest night, when the moon was covered and I roamed through wreckage, a nimbus-clouded voice directed me, live in the layers, not on the litter. Though I lack the art to decipher it, no doubt the next chapter in my book of transformations is already written. I am not done with my changes. Live in the layers, not on the litter. Kunitz said that he had been dreaming when those very words came to him from a voice in a dark cloud. We all recognize that wisdom comes from many sources, from great philosophers, theologians, renowned scientists, and perhaps at times mysteriously appearing even in our own dreams. However, in my experience, wisdom's origins are often far more earthy. My parents had 7 boys, no girls, and Mom was determined that the old nugget of wisdom, boys will be boys, would not be the last word in our house. Her boys would learn to do housework. We took turns doing the dishes, vacuuming, dusting, doing laundry, even washing windows, a particularly dreaded task for a young woman. I'll never forget when Mom came to look at the window I'd carelessly washed. After a moment, she'd say, "David, are you sure you washed those corners?" And then she offered her wisdom like a voice speaking out of a Stanley Kunitz dream. "Son, if you're careful to wash it right the first time, you won't have to do it again." As a kid, I hated those words because I heard them more than once. Mom's wisdom was far too earthy for my young palate to appreciate. We all know something of earthy wisdom. An apple a day. Indeed, indeed. Loose lips. Waste not. Yes, we all know those. And as pithy as those sayings may at first seem, they convey wisdom that was hard-won by those who've gone before us. Waste not, want not, is not simply a pithy saying. There are stories behind that saying, and real people who lived those stories, people like you and me. I wonder what was happening when that phrase was first spoken. Was there a serious drought, and families who had easily tossed off the small bits of leftovers now were hungry and were caring for every morsel? Were people eking out an existence after a hurricane, remembering when life had order to it and was better? Or was something happening in the life of one particular person or family? Imagining a young father who died of a heart attack, leaving his wife to raise their 3 young ones alone. Waste not, want not. Was it first said by a young college kid who'd squandered the allotment his parents had given him for the semester for living expenses on beer and other things? I bet if we could visit the home of the ones who first used that phrase, we might find a generous portion of remorse served at that dinner table, with a side of anxiety as well. Why wasn't I more careful? That's how a great deal of wisdom is born, as the result of hard-won life experience. Well, today we're excited to welcome 13 new members into this religious community. And we have no doubt that you bring with you a great deal of hard-won life experience and wisdom as well. As I found in my relatively short time here, this is a religious community brimming with wisdom and experience, and we like to share it. We are not generally a bunch of wallflowers here. So this morning I have a question for the 13 of you, and by extension, for all of us. Do you have a set of writings that you can point us to that have been a valuable resource, wisdom in your life? Writings you turn to for guidance or inspiration, a sense of groundedness? Virtually all the world's cultures and religions do have such a set of writings called wisdom literature. Properly understood, wisdom literature doesn't presume to offer answers for all time. Wisdom literature invites us into a conversation with those who've gone before us about the important matters of life. It's not about giving blind allegiance to some external authority, this thing which has been passed down for the generations. But neither is wisdom literature content with cotton candy thinking. The purpose of wisdom literature is to help us understand who we are or who we aspire to be. It serves to ground us, providing a framework for our values. Yes, wisdom can be the work of philosophers and theologians and scientists who reflect on life, but it can also be that earthy life learning that we experience, such as waste not, want not. Probably the most commonly recognized religious wisdom literature in our culture has been the Bible, the Hebrew and Christian scriptures. More accurately, particular books in the Bible are classified as wisdom. The book of Proverbs, the books of Job and Ecclesiastes, and parts of the Psalms. That's the deceptive thing about the Bible. It isn't really a book at all. It's more accurately a library of books written over thousands of years. I liken it to having one large volume that holds a book or two from the 12th century English, several written during the American Revolution, another during the Roaring '20s, World War II, maybe one or two from the McCarthy era, the Reagan era, and now after 9/11. All bound under a single cover. In a sense, that's what the Bible is. It's things that have been written over a long period of time, a collection of important writings that people have found contain wisdom, helpful in their lives. So the Bible, and much wisdom literature like it, does not speak with one voice. For example, the book of Proverbs reveals an almost mechanical understanding of the world. If you are just, good things will happen to you. If you are unjust, bad things will happen to you. The Proverbs' approach to wisdom is basically cause and effect. It's fairly black and white. For example, raise up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Really? Is that your experience? Does that ring true for you? Perhaps sometimes, but always. How about this one? Folly is bound up in the heart of a boy, but the rod of discipline drives it far away. A useful text for a mother of 7 sons. But I bet we can have a good conversation about this particular bit of wisdom. Do we really believe that? Or how about this one? Oppressing the poor in order to enrich oneself and giving to the rich will lead only to loss. Wow. I can think of a group of folks who would do well to think about that passage. But is it true? Is it true that if we take from the poor and give to the rich, that it will only lead to loss? Proverbs, cause and effect. On the other hand, a couple of doors down from Proverbs in the Bible, we find the book of Job. It was written as a direct contradiction to the cause and effect wisdom of life. Job was a fine citizen. He was smart, he was hardworking, he was generous with the poor, he was just in his business practices. Job has healthy children and his business is wildly successful. You might say that, loosely speaking, Bill Gates is like Job. And yet, calamity happens. One by one, Job's children die. Freak accidents, rare illnesses, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And Job has one financial setback after another and eventually loses virtually everything he owns. It probably even foreclosed on his house. And on top of that, he becomes physically sick, sores, oozing, probably a staph infection, and without work, he has no health insurance. Job's partner in life had probably been raised in one of those cause and effect households, where they understood that if you were good, good things happened to you. If you were bad, bad things happened to you. And that's not the way it was working out here. And so she advises Job to curse God and die. Proverbs and Job. Two voices in a wisdom conversation that we can enter. Is there order in life? Is there order in life with Proverbs, or does life just happen? Is it random, like in Job? Or is even that question too simple? You want to join that conversation? That's what wisdom literature does at its best. It invites us into serious conversation if we have the chutzpah to really enter into that conversation. You know, conversations like this can get dicey. They can get a little testy. We have our immigration class going on right now. I'd be amazed if everyone in that room felt the same way about immigration. It's wisdom literature, trying to puzzle through hard things together, speaking honestly, recognizing that we're going to understand things like Proverbs and Job. That it's not always going to work out so well. As I prepared for today, I asked a number of UUCP folks if they had writing which functions for them as wisdom in their lives. As you might imagine, given our group, I had some delightful conversations. Let me mention just a few. One person guided me to the Hindu text Rig Veda, from which Anne read earlier. In truth, I know next to nothing about that sacred text. Yet people have been in conversation with its wisdom for well over 3,000 years. And yet that's just as long as we suspect it was written. It was probably in oral form for 1,000 years before that. And today there are 1 billion people for whom Rig Veda is a source of wisdom, is a conversation partner for them about how then they shall live. I need to know something about that text, or I'd like to know something about that text. Another person turned me on to that Harry Potter quote. It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities. The person said that this quote has been really important to us in raising our kids, and now they're young adults off to college, and they're quoting it back to us. That's wisdom literature in action. It's living, it's breathing, it's going from one generation to the next. Someone else brought me that Stanley Kunitz poem as something she returns to again and again, to think about the seasons and the meaning and the purpose of her life. That poem is a gold mine, isn't it? Reading it as well. And one person pointed me to Sherry Tepper, a feminist science fiction writer whose writing inspires her to think about old challenges in new ways, fresh new ways. I had never even heard of Sherry Tepper, yet at least one of our community finds wisdom for living in her novels. So I'm curious, what's your wisdom literature? What do you read that invites you to think deeply about your life, your values, choices that you make? Kunitz encourages us to live in the layers, not on the litter, Wisdom is found in the layers of our lives and the hard-won experience of living, both our own and the generations that have come before us. How sad it would be to live as isolated little islands in this stream of human history, cut off from the vast river of wisdom of those who have lived before us. What a feast, what an amazing thing they bring us with their wisdom from the many thousands of years. And your wisdom is a gift for the community as well. You probably all know that quickening of the spirit that comes when you recognize that you've learned something along the way in life. Maybe a light bulb goes on and you realize, I went through that really, really hard time, and this is what I take from it. This is what I can do with it. Your life experiences have not been in vain. Perhaps you've had broken relationships or made some bad decisions along the way. Maybe injustice has spent some time at your table, or tragedy has visited your home. But these life experiences have not been in vain, because we share our wisdom with one another. That's why we gather here week after week. That's why we take a risk, perhaps, and join one of our covenant groups, as I did when I first came here. Small group, 6 or 8 people. You meet every other week, or usually twice a month. A few hours, just this little group, getting to know one another, getting to learn about the wisdom that each one brings, and the sources of wisdom in each one's life. That covenant group that I joined was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was really delightful. I met some wonderful, wonderful souls who were in many ways very different from myself. We gather together to help each other step through the litter that Kunitz refers to, that can so easily distract us, so that we can live